Hello and welcome to Mac Power Users. My name is Stephen Hackett. I'm joined by my friend and yours, Mr. David Sparks.
Hey, Stephen. How are you, my friend?
I am good. We're back. We got a document in front of us. We know what time that means.
Yeah, time for Mac Power Users.
Time for the show.
iMessages. Deep dive. Dive. Before we do so, though, we've got some housekeeping. We recorded the episode about the iPad right after the Apple announcement, and we have some mea culpas.
The big one is, and it was on me, I made a mistake and said that the iPad Pro Magic Keyboard should have backlighting. Well, it turns out that it does, and it has since it was first introduced back in 2020. But it's kind of confusing because there's no hardware buttons on the keyboard to adjust the backlighting, and that you can't like combine it with a function key or something to do it. You can change it in settings, general hardware keyboards, and you can also add keyboard brightness to Control Center, which some people also pointed out, which does make it easier. But I would love to see that actually be hardware keys because it's a kind of a confusing, I think mostly forgotten about feature, and it's a pretty good one.
Yes, I also got one. I thought that the chip binning related to the graphics cores, and it was actually the performance cores. So it wasn't. It was the wrong set of cores, and it's just one of those things. When you record right after, sometimes you don't get all the information.
Yeah, sometimes that's true. Did you order an iPad?
Did I buy an iPad? I did. Went into the store over the weekend and I brought my iPad 13 Pro 2018 plus two more. My wife had one because I gave her my 11 inch and her old one. And that one I got $70 for. But hey, $70 better than a poke in the eye, as they say. And my daughter had an iPad that she hadn't used for years. So I brought them in, sold them all. And it paid a pittance. I think it paid for my keyboard when you had them all up. But I went ahead and bought the iPad Pro 13-inch, 512 gigabyte black with a keyboard and a pencil. I went all in, and it was a fun trip.
You got the regular display, not the nano texture.
I was tempted. They had a nano texture there. I spent time playing with it, and I liked the feel of it on the pencil, and I liked the way it looked, except I was already so far in this thing, and I didn't want to spend an extra $500. That's really what it came down to.
Yeah.
And it's new. I don't know what in 6 months, are they going to fall apart or not? It's because it's new. Several of my labs members did buy the matte ones, and I've already heard back several of them. They love them.
Yeah.
I think it looks really nice and it feels good. Like I said, if it was the same price, I probably would have got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you have to go up to the 1 terabyte as well. It's not available in the lower capacity. I mean, it gets expensive. I bought one too.
Okay.
I did.
Not surprised. Yeah. What'd you get?
I did the 11-inch in silver, 512 gig cellular, because I love cellular on iPads. With the keyboard. And I did the keyboard in white, because I just decided, look, I'm just going to live in today, and how that keyboard looks in a year is future Steven's problem. So
you gotta pick a side, man.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So silver and white, I picked the light side, and it's a pretty great iPad. The display is unbelievable. I mean, the OLED is so nice on an iPad.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's just a really nice upgrade. I mean, I was shocked that I kept one 6 years. That's not like me. But it's also kind of a testament to the need to upgrade an iPad because, the whole, there's a whole thing going on the internet about the iPad. And I listened to Connected with you and Federico talking about it on my last week. And I agree, Apple's left a lot of low hanging fruit on the iPad operating system. As a result, we don't need to upgrade very often.
Mm-hmm.
But it's nice. I'm happy with it. My iPad situation, I kept, because I had a mini with a cellular connection. And that one has always been the one that I pay for the cellular on. And that's the one, frankly, that leaves the house with me. You know, when I go out to work remotely somewhere, usually I just bring a little folding keyboard and that. The 13-inch for me mainly is a thing that I can do 3D design on. I can do music on it. There's a bunch of use cases I have for it, but I don't find, historically, I haven't found myself taking it out of the house very often. So I didn't feel like I needed another cellular bill,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really great, but nice job. But like everybody else on the internet, I think the software needs to get better.
That's the story for sure, and not a new one.
I have a related story though. Actually, the Labs members already know this. I wrote about it in a newsletter to them. I was in the Apple Store for 2 hours because when you sell old iPads, it's like there's a whole thing. It takes time, And I was down for it. I stayed for 2 hours, but I sat right next to the Vision Pro demo area.
Mm-hmm.
In 2 hours, zero Vision Pro demos.
Yeah.
In 2 hours in a busy Apple Store, and I asked the Apple Store employee, what's going on with Vision Pro? And she said, we hardly ever sell them. And I just thought, ooh, that's bad. Still like mine, still use it, but I think that product is going to have an uphill battle for a while.
I think so too. Yeah, my store is the same way. In fact, the demo table, like where Mary and I went in and got our demo, they were using for iPad pickup because I got mine on day one. So yeah, anyways, that's iPad stuff. We just wanted to insert it here because we're not quite sure our next feedback episode is. It may be in a couple weeks or it may be in like a month. We're just kind of working out June. WWDC is a lot of moving pieces for us.
Today on More Power Users, OpenAI made some announcements. They've got some cool new tricks they can do. We did an AI episode recently. In More Power Users, we're gonna talk about those new announcements, and we're gonna have a special guest, by the way, guest from OpenAI is going to be there with us.
Very, very excited about that.
She sounds remarkably like Scarlett Johansson, but she's not.
And there was a report out this morning that it's not her voice, and they're changing it because people think it's too close. So
yeah,
so there's that.
Well, we can ask our guest. Maybe she'll know.
Now's a great time to become a member. You get More Power Users, which is an ad-free, longer version of the show that we do each and every week. But you also get access to the Relay members Discord, a newsletter we put out to Relay members, a couple of members-only podcasts, and during May and June, a bunch of shows are putting out annual specials. This year, David, you and I spoke about our earliest computing memories, far before the Mac for each of us, and yours was actually before the Mac period. But I loved that conversation. I had so much fun. I ended up editing it. I was like, I love talking about this stuff. So that's in the crossover feed. So if you are a member, go check that out. And if you're not, now's a great time. More Power Users is just $7 a month or $70 a year. We got a link in the show notes for you to learn more and check it out. And if you do support us directly, thank you. It really it goes a long way in making what we do possible.
Yeah, I mean, the business of podcasting has changed a lot since I started in it, and membership is the reason we keep the lights on. But that going back to that member special, that was one of my favorite recordings I've ever done with you. It was just so fun talking about old computers together for a little while. Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
The best. So, iMessage. Today we are taking the deep dive into iMessage. It's sort of the glue that holds a lot of stuff together for a lot of people. And we thought it was time that we sit down and go through what it is, what it could do, some tips and tricks. Because like this document, David, I'll tell you, I took the lead on this one. It's way longer than I thought it would be. Like once I started like going through all the screens and going through all the Apple documentation, I was like, oh gosh, there's a lot of stuff here. And we'll have a bunch of links in the show notes to a bunch of stuff. And we may not even get to touch it all. That's why we have feedback episodes. But I want to start with a little bit of iMessage history because, a lot of people had text messaging before the iPhone. I certainly did. And back in the day, you got a set number of texts on your plan. And if you were like me in high school and you went over them, your mom got mad at you because there were overages. And iMessage was a move away from that. It was like iOS 5 and this is 2011, so it's been 13 years this summer. And it's like, basically, what if you wanted text from your iPhone, your iPod Touch, your iPad, later your Mac, but it ran over data and not the cellular network in terms of like SMS was kind of like its own lane. Like if you think about cell networks, you have voice, you had SMS, text messaging, and then you had data, kind of 3 lanes. And one thing iMessage did was take texting out of the SMS lane, put it in the data lane, and all of a sudden, Apple could do a lot of cool stuff with it and add a lot of features kind of on top of plain old SMS.
Yeah, they say this whole blue bubble, green bubble thing is Apple playing a dirty trick or elitism. But if you were back there in 2011, it meant that it was the difference between text you paid for and text that you got for free. That was the original blue bubble designation to me. And at the time, my kids were little, and they were starting to text, and I was very aware that they could get me a big bill if they didn't know what they were doing. So the blue bubble, I think, actually started with good intention. Allow me to send texts for free.
Yeah, I mean, if you didn't live through this time period, like people were counting their text messages, right? I know I certainly was.
Yeah.
But iMessage also freed text messaging from the phone number in a lot of ways, where you could use your Apple ID or later even another associated email address. So maybe you didn't want to use your phone number for texting. You could use, your name at mac.com or me.com or iCloud.com, whatever you're using. And it also brought texting to the rest of the Apple ecosystem. So all of a sudden, you didn't just have to like pull your phone out to answer a text. You could do it from your iPod Touch or your iPad. It took about a year for it to show up on the Mac, which is like this whole other story where they basically crammed iMessage into the old iChat application. And for a while, I'd forgotten about this until I dug back through all this stuff. In messages on the Mac, you could still sign into like AOL Instant Messenger and have iMessage side by side. It was a weird transition, but things like Instant Messenger weren't scaling to the mobile era, right? Those apps were out there, but largely because of the limitations of the early iPhones, they weren't really all that useful. How good is your instant messaging app if it can't run in the background or it can't get notifications? And so the shift was already happening where we wanted our communication to be mobile. We wanted to be on all of our platforms. And Apple sort of answered all of that with those early versions of iMessage.
I don't recall, was the iMessage encrypted from day one? I don't think it was, but I don't remember now.
I don't know. So that is something that I looked into. I do know, and we don't have a lot about it because like I don't fully understand it, but they've gone from like standard end-to-end encryption to like a more complicated like cryptographic method that supposedly will be able to stand up against computers of like the far future. But
in theory,
I mean, right. Like, again, we're not going very far into that because we're not cryptographic experts here on Mac Power users.
But the point is, I think from day one, Apple's had consumer privacy in mind with this. And,
definitely.
And what it was is using, even if it wasn't end-to-end encrypted, I want to say that it's been encrypted from day one, but I may be wrong. But it was through Apple servers, not through the phone company.
Right.
And, those, I don't think there's anything much more public. As an attorney, I used to subpoena phone records all the time. And witnesses were always surprised when I'd sit there and read their text messages back to them.
Yeah. SMS was just open. And to your point, it was up to AT&T and Verizon and Sprint and T-Mobile and who else to manage that. And iMessage being encrypted, it being data and not that sort of middle lane I was talking about earlier, is a very different beast.
But there's another technology on the horizon.
Yes.
Well, maybe not even on the horizon. It's here, but it's on the Apple horizon. RCS. What's that?
Yeah. So RCS is a replacement for SMS. And SMS has been around for a billion years. RCS, Rich Communication Services, really kind of picking up steam 2017, 2018, when Google and others started talking about it as a replacement for SMS. And it promised many iMessage-like features, so support for larger file sharing, support for read receipts, sort of the things that we've gotten used to in the iMessage ecosystem. It also was going to make this more competitive with things like WhatsApp. We're talking about iMessage today. In many ways, iMessage is very North American centric, and much of the rest of the world, WhatsApp or Telegram or these other services are kind of how you communicate. And SMS is kind of being sitting there like a bump on a log, not really doing anything. So RCS was kind of put together as a replacement for that. The history of RCS is extremely complicated because it is a protocol managed by a body of companies. It's not like Apple overseeing iMessage. And so in the beginning, it did not include end-to-end encryption, which a lot of people rightly called foul on. Then Google said it'd be adding it, but not to the RCS standard, but to its own messages app. So you can kind of think of RCS as like email. You have your email service and your email application. Now, email's not encrypted, but Google was like, well, we're going to add encryption at the app layer, but not the data layer. And, they've done that. And now you get like a little lock icon, but not all of your conversations are necessarily end-to-end encrypted because it also matters what the other person is using. It's still very messy. But in general, if you kind of back up, the idea is to bring iMessage-like features, WhatsApp-like features to standard texting. And we need to know about it as the Apple community because Apple's going to be supporting RCS later in 2024. So I would assume with iOS 18 and its cousins. It's not going to replace iMessage. It's going to be the fallback. So if you are talking to somebody on an Android phone and they're using RCS like in the Google Messages app, then you can do some more iMessage-like things with them. We don't fully know Apple's plans here. All Apple has said publicly so far is that it is going to support the universal standard, which does not include end-to-end encryption. Remember what I said earlier, end-to-end encryption right now is done at the app layer, not the service layer. And Apple's like going to go work with the body to make it all end-to-end encrypted. So there's still many unknown things here, but the support is coming. It should make texting with our Android family and friends better for everybody, but not as good as iMessage. It's kind of going to be in between for those of us on the Apple side.
I sure hope that Apple does find a way to support encryption with it, though. I'm a big fan of end-to-end on this stuff, and it seems really consistent kind of with their whole outlook on this stuff to find a way. So hopefully they're making that effort.
Yeah.
And you're right. We're going to hear about it at WWDC, and it'll probably be on our phones in September when it releases.
Yeah, I think so. And it's still going to be blue bubble and green bubble.
Yeah.
And, we say that, but I just want to highlight this for a second. I don't think much about that, right? Like I got friends and family on Android. It's whatever. I can send them stuff. It's mostly fine, even using SMS. But in like schools, like starting in the fall, I'm going to have 2 high schoolers. I can tell you that they know about and talk about the blue bubble, green bubble thing. And again, this is very North American centric. I understand that, but there is a social thing with this in some circles. And, I've kind of told my kids like people use whatever they want to use. I don't care about it, but it is a thing that people notice and talk about. And that's, I don't think Apple set out for that to be the case, but it is certainly the case now for some people that they see that green bubble and they have feelings associated with it. Personally, I think that's gross and honestly kind of dumb, but it is what it is. But RCS will remain green bubbles. So there you go.
Yeah, we're 100% in agreement, and I just don't care. But
no.
At the same time, I can see Apple never budging on that.
I don't think so. I don't think they will. Because it is, in those circles of young people, it is a wedge to get people onto the iPhone. And iMessage is also a barrier to leaving the Apple ecosystem because I'm telling you, like, I love having iMessage everywhere. Most of the messages I send during the day are from my Mac. And I've got people I talk to throughout the day, just like I would Instant Messenger, back in college. because it's just on my
Yeah.
Mac running in the background all the time. I don't want to go back to a world where texting equals my phone. And Google's done some stuff on Windows, and like RCS may even unlock more capability there for people in those ecosystems. But when I think about leaving the Apple ecosystem, like I think when a lot of people think about that, iMessage is very close to the top of the list of reasons they don't want to.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by NetSuite. Go to netsuite.com/MPU for the leading integrated cloud business software suite. Quick math. The less your business spends on operations, multiple systems, and delivering your product or services, the more margin you have and the more money you keep. But the higher expenses on materials, employees, distribution, and borrowing, everything costs more. So to reduce costs and headaches, smart businesses are graduating to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one platform and one source of truth. With NetSuite, you reduce IT costs because NetSuite lives in the cloud with no hardware required, accessed from anywhere. You cut the costs of maintaining multiple systems because you've got one unified business management suite. You improve efficiency by bringing all your major business processes into one platform, slashing manual tasks and errors. Over 37,000 companies have already made the move. So do the math. See how you'll profit with NetSuite. In the information age, the way to get ahead in business is to manage the information, and that's what NetSuite does. I was a business lawyer nearly 30 years. I run my own business, and I can tell you every time the information gets distributed among multiple systems, it costs money and causes problems. NetSuite fixes that by putting it all in one place. And by popular demand, NetSuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/MPU. That's netsuite.com/MPU. netsuite.com/MPU. Once again, and our thanks to NetSuite for their support of the Mac Power Users and Relay FM.
iMessage has a whole lot of features. I mean, scrolling through the screens on your iPhone or the help documentation, there's a lot of stuff. Some of the basics, right? We talked about it being on data, so it works over Wi-Fi or cellular service, doesn't count against your SMS limits, but it also means you can do some cool stuff like sending large attachments because it's integrated. If you send a bunch of photos, it can like upload them to iCloud and let the other person know when they're ready to download. Like Apple has made iMessage kind of baked in all over the place. But there's also some like really sort of straightforward chat features that really make it a nice place to be. You know, simple things like typing indicators and read receipts. So you can see when someone is typing, and maybe that causes you anxiety. So I think sometimes it can. But you can also have read receipts. So you can see when you can always see when a message was delivered. And then if the other person has read receipts on and you have them all, like there's a bunch of settings you can set for individuals or groups. You can see when that message was actually read with a little timestamp.
Yeah, my kids told me that that's a joke people do is they took a screenshot of the typing indicator and then they'll just send it to someone as an image.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I'm like, well, that doesn't really work because it animates a little bit. And they're like, no, it's good enough. It works. Trust me. Yeah. No, it's come a long way. I think one of the questions I'd like to ask at the end of the show is iMessage as good as it can be? You know, is Apple doing what they can? I think anytime the subject comes up, I think Apple knows iMessage might be its most important application for several reasons in terms of the amount of usage and the stickiness factor that it brings to the iPhone. But it clearly is an app that gets a lot of attention from Apple.
Definitely. It's in every keynote just about. They know it's an important part of their ecosystem. A relatively recent change to it, I think a couple years ago, was pinned chats. So you can have up to 9, again, individuals or threads, groups of people, pinned at the top of the window. above just the list. And I love this feature. I've got, parents, family, friends, a couple of coworkers. Like, it is very useful. I honestly could use 12, but but it's
Yeah,
it's
me too.
really nice to have that, and it syncs across iCloud. So if you change your pinned conversation somewhere, they show up everywhere.
No pressure, Steven, but you're my number six. You're my
Okay.
number six.
Yeah, you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. You're 4,
Oh man.
counting from the top.
Well,
But
you know what? I'm gonna make you number 4
okay,
right now.
okay. So yeah, it's really pretty great. One thing that I do quite a bit is I have if you're on a trip or like you're at a conference or something, unpin somebody and like temporarily add somebody up there. That can be really
Yeah.
helpful if you're communicating with somebody a lot over a short period of time and then it kind of goes back to normal. That's a very useful thing.
Yeah. On your point of there should be 12, I mean, give us 15. You know, we don't have to use them all.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the things where Apple's trying to decide for me because they don't like the way it would look if it's not a perfect square.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, please, come on. I'm a
Yeah.
big boy. I can handle it.
My wife has 8. There's like an open spot and it's killing me.
Oh, does it? But no, she's perfect. So when she goes on a trip, she just adds the 9th one. She doesn't have to unpin anybody.
I guess so. But she upgraded. She got a new phone for Mother's Day. She went from a 13 mini to a 15, and
All right.
she's sad about the size.
Yeah.
But in setting it up, I just kind of like, you probably do this too. I think a lot of our listeners do. Like sometimes when you just have someone's device in your hands, you're like, let me just like run through a bunch of stuff and like, make
Yeah.
sure that things are kind of the way they should be. And I needed a 2-factor code for something. So I opened messages to get it. And I was like, 8? Like, why is there an empty spot down there?
Yeah, no.
It's killing me.
I know. Something, if you listen to the Mac Power users, this is one thing I strongly recommend, is do not advise your spouse on how to use any technology.
I mean, that's probably good advice.
Because, I mean, we're particular. You listen to the show, we're making the show, we're among friends here, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I've got myself into a lot of hot water over the years with my wife trying to like, all right, group messages and collaboration. So again, this is like standard fare for a messaging app at this point, but
Yeah.
But I find the group message very robust with iMessage. I've got several standing groups that are important to me. Like one is called Sparks Prime, and that's just the 4 immediate members of my nuclear family. But then I have one for my siblings, and I have one. I'm in that Creators Guild. We have a group message, and it's surprising to me over the years how these have become primary lines of communication for even work-related things, and really they're up to the job, like you said earlier, because they're omnipresent. If you've got Apple hardware, no matter where you are, these group messages can get to you, and the tool set around messages that we're going to be talking about throughout the show. There's a lot of cases where I think just a message thread is better than setting up a custom Slack or doing something more more exotic.
Yeah. I think that's wise. With the group threads, you can change a lot of stuff. You can change the name and photo. You can add and remove people. You can hide alerts, which is fantastic if you're in a chatty one that you don't need to be up to date on all the time. And in both the group threads, like the groups and the individuals, messages will collate media that has been shared between the two of you. So if you're like, oh, I know David sent me that picture like a month ago, I didn't save it. You can actually go into your message, tap the little information button and scroll down. And there's like a media collection of everything that's gone back and forth. And that has saved my bacon a few times. Like, I know I sent this to somebody, they sent it to me. I cannot find it anywhere else. I love that Messages just sort of collects those on a per conversation basis.
And the group messages are great. And like you said earlier, they can be pinned. So if you've got one that you use frequently, pin it and you're in business.
Mm-hmm. Collaboration is also tied into this. And we've talked about it in terms of Apple Notes and some other things, but you can basically use messages as a hub to collaborate on Freeform or iWork or any app that supports Apple's sort of modern collaboration stuff, where you can
Yeah.
share a link with the group, everyone can have access to it, you can talk about it in the thread. This is not something I do a lot of. I have a couple of shared notes, I have a couple of shared Freeform boards, but my sharing happens in Notion or Google Docs. Doesn't really happen within the Apple ecosystem.
Okay, well that's interesting. I use it a bit more. Like whenever I do, like when we do guests in the labs and things, usually I know they're an Apple person, so I'll have an Apple Note and I'll collab it and I'll share it through Apple Notes is the primary way I deliver those invitations. Just because there's I guess there's an etiquette around messages where people look at those sooner than they do email, and sometimes like an email can get buried or they don't see it. So like when I open up something to collaboration, I usually send it through messages, and
Hmm.
I do that with. I think I've done it with you a few times over the years, and
Yeah.
I do it with a lot of people, and I think messages is good for that.
Yeah.
What is the expected return time on a message? For you, what do you think? Like if someone sends you a message,
I'm usually pretty quick, probably to a fault.
yeah, I'm not. I think that, but that is interesting to me because I feel like people generally email, they'll give you a day or two, but with a message they expect a response pretty quickly,
Yeah.
and I don't check it except a couple times a day, so
Yeah.
I don't reply that quickly, but I think I'm a little bit of an outlier there. I think
Yeah.
most people reply almost immediately.
I give you like 24 hours. I was like, hey,
Yeah, you're good with that. I
hey,
guess because I think you get me. You
yeah,
get
I
me.
do get to,
But
yeah, totally. More people should be like you, including me. Um,
yeah,
but another, so talking about expectations, I think another thing um, is when you're in a group conversation, there's a flow to it, right? And we've all been in those, and like someone answers something from like 2 hours ago, and it's like, what are you talking about? It's very confusing. And a feature they added several years ago was replying in line to a specific message. And so
yeah,
you can long press or swipe right or right click, again, depending on what platform you're on, and
yeah,
reply to something directly. And it gets this little line drawn. And sometimes the line is like a loop de loop. I don't really understand like the how to make the loopy loop happen, but sometimes it does. And I always delight in it because it's like a fun little animation. But
yeah,
it can be a way to manage things a little bit better if you're replying to something old. It's different than like in Slack or Discord or Teams where you create a thread underneath underneath a comment, and then you're kind of like clicking down and down and down to go see them. It's all
yeah,
still in line. There's no depth to an iMessage conversation. It's all the same pane, just scrolling past you. But
yeah,
it can be great to like reply to something earlier or remind somebody of something, or just help keep things a little bit tidy. I was very unsure about this feature when it came out of how useful it would be, because I mean, like at work, like Relay runs on Slack, and I'm very comfortable in Slack. Like, oh, we're gonna create a thread here and have a couple going at a time, like keeping conversations separate. And I thought that's what iMessage needed, but I think the replying in line, for my uses at least, is fantastic, and it's simple. People get it. People understand it. Like, when I saw like my parents sending me a reply to something, several messages ago, I was like, okay, this has reached the masses. Like, people understand how this works, and I'm glad Apple's done it.
no, agreed. I use it daily, and if you've never used it, you should try it. I mean, the old question, hey, um, can I borrow $1,000? And did you get your test results? And then you answer yes, right? Yeah, you've got to be able to identify threads in
Yeah.
vocal in vocal threads. You've got to be able to kind of like nail in what you're responding to,
Mm-hmm.
and this is exactly the way to do it. And I think it's a nice feature and good on them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Same thing with the reactions, the reaction feature, which also is kind of new. I guess I say kind of new because this app is so old, but it's been around a while, and you can put a reaction in, and this is where you see the difference between a blue bubble and a green bubble, because a lot of times that it writes out in text in a green bubble, but
Yeah.
you can just put a thumbs up on it, and they added stickers to that. We got that covered later, but all this stuff is just making it easier to communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the newer features, as of I think last year, were being able to undo a recently sent message. So you have 2 minutes to unsend a message if maybe you sent it to the wrong person or thought better of it or something like that. Now, they may still have seen it. They may have seen the notification. Like, that's out of your control, but it is there. You can also edit a message up to 5 times within 15 minutes. And Apple shows the other person the message was edited. And if they tap or click on the little edited label, you see the history. So most of the times, right, you can just like see a hilarious typo somebody made, but the edit history is there. It's not like some other services where once you edit, the original one is gone. I think it's good Apple did it this way for transparency and just like ease of understanding in a conversation. But both of those are pretty new, and I definitely utilize the edit one quite a bit.
Yeah. The journalism, you can take the boy out of journalism. You can't take the journalism out of the boy.
Yeah, exactly.
I can see that. Yeah, me too. So I like my messages. My kids make fun of me because my messages are always phrased proper English, capitalization, punctuation. But, I'm not going to change. Sorry.
No, it's great.
If I catch a typo, I'm going to go back and fix it.
Yeah. Sometimes a typo can be, life or death, depending on what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
You can also recover deleted messages. So if you delete a message, you can restore them up to 30 days later. I'll have a link in the show notes about this. You basically go into the conversation list, tap edit, and then there's a section in there for recently deleted. I think I've done this one time since it's rolled out, but it's there. And again, it may save your bacon sometime.
Yeah. All right. And best of all, with the recent updates, now all of this stuff just works across all the platforms. Even though the Messages app worked on the Mac for a long time, it felt like a second class citizen where a lot of the features would show up on iPad and iOS, but they wouldn't work on the Mac. And that used to always drive me a little nuts, but they fixed that.
Yeah, they did. So they've actually replaced the old Messages app with a Catalyst version as of a couple of years ago. And that means that basically all the features are there. Now, they're behind right clicks as opposed to long presses, right? Some of the placement's a little bit different. There's a couple of big differences. There's no third-party iMessage apps on macOS, just ones that just a handful really that Apple have done. We're going to talk about iMessage apps later. Spoiler alert, they're not all that great, in our opinion. And the Mac app includes a couple of features that aren't on the iPhone, iPad that again we'll touch on later. But 95% of the service is the same on the Mac as everywhere else, which is great. Like I said earlier, most of my use with iMessage is on the Mac. This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Ecamm. Ecamm Live is the leading video production and live streaming studio built for the Mac. Ecamm does all aspects of video. It's not just about live streaming, although it's awesome at that. It's perfect for simplifying your entire video workflow. It's easy enough to get started quickly, but powerful enough you can create just about anything with video. You can do it all with the Ecamm app. And that's one thing that I love about it. You're not having to string a bunch of different programs together to make this work. So whether you're streaming or recording or podcasting or presenting, everything you need is there in Ecamm, including support for multiple cameras and screen sharing with a live camera switcher that lets you direct the show in real time. With Ecamm, you stand out from the crowd with high-quality video. Add logos, titles, lower thirds, and graphics. Share your screen, drop in video clips, bring on guests, use a green screen, and so much more. Ecamm Live does it all. Their members are entrepreneurs, marketing professionals, podcasters, educators, musicians, church leaders, bloggers, and content creators of all kinds. Get 1 month free today at ecamm.com/MacPowerUsers and use the code MacPowerUsers. That's 1 month free of Ecamm Live at ecamm.com/MacPowerUsers. That's ECAMM.com. Ecamm, eCam.com/Mac Power users. Go there now to check it out. Our thanks to eCam for their support of the show.
All right, so let's talk about security. I think this is something near and dear to both our hearts, and Apple has done a good job with encryption and security with iMessage. This is from the beginning, starting with the basics. Messages are backed up in iCloud and encrypted if you enable iCloud backup or messages in the cloud. So that gives you the ability to see them across devices, but at the same time encrypt them.
Yeah, this is a big deal. One of the main things that sets iMessage apart from a lot of other services. Now, others do have end-to-end encryption. Things like WhatsApp and Signal and Telegram, like they all offer different levels of security and privacy. Very clearly, it's a big focus for Apple. But a couple of basics here, and some of these have changed over the years. But the first pillar is that messages are backed up in iCloud and encrypted. So the backup is encrypted if you enable iCloud backup or messages in the cloud. It used to be that while messages was end-to-end encrypted itself, the iMessage data on your phone as part of your iCloud backup was not. And so the government or somebody go to Apple and say, hey, I need David Sparks' data. And while your messages may have been encrypted, the backup wasn't. And that is something that has changed in the era of advanced data protection, which we talked about 2 years ago or about a year and a half ago when it was introduced. But this is additional level of security on top of the regular iCloud login and two-factor stuff that does many things. One of the things it does is it adds end-to-end encryption to areas of iCloud that were not end-to-end encrypted before. And I turned this on when it was introduced, and I have not turned it off except one time to fix a HomePod. I fell into this weird loophole with an ancient HomePod I was trying to update. But this stuff is now end-to-end encrypted, including in the backup if you have ADP on.
Yeah, it's great. I think this is a great feature. I am also an avid user of ADP. I've had it turned on. I waited a few months after they released it just to which is unusual for me. Usually I'm ahead of the game on this stuff, but because it's such a big deal, and if there was something wrong with it, I wanted to make sure they sorted that out before I turned it on. ADP is great. I have heard from the inside at Apple that it goes very high in the company, the number of subpoenas they answer and times they turn over user data. And I think it's a big deal that they do. I don't think they like doing that. I mean, the other side of this is not just trying to dodge law enforcement. It's like if somebody were ever compromise Apple servers and you don't have ADP on, they're going to get all your text messages.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's just so many different ways to have your data. As soon as it's out there somewhere that other people can read it, and other people are going to read it. And that's why one of the reasons why I'm a happy Apple customer is because of their privacy approach.
Yeah, me too. And there's a lot of like related stuff there with advanced data protection we're just kind of leaving on the table for today. Let's talk about what actually is encrypted. So the contents of your messages and the things you send, so attachments, etc., are end-to-end encrypted. That means that Apple cannot read your messages, and no one between you and Apple can read any of your messages. So your cell carrier, your ISP, the dodgy coffee shop Wi-Fi you're on, they're not able to see what is happening with your iMessage data. They see that it takes up some amount of space, and but it is basically a blob of data that they cannot see. Now, the phone number and the email address you use is shown to people you contact, and you can choose how you share your name and photo. But that's a little bit different than the contents of the messages that are end-to-end encrypted. And we should probably explain what that means, because we've now said it many times on this podcast episode.
Often encryption is just in transit, which means the data is encrypted in transit, but unencrypted once it's received. And that's what happens with a lot of these services where they'll have a server with all of your text messages on them. And even though it may have been encrypted when it arrived, it gets unencrypted at the end and they get to read it. And end-to-end encryption is a focus on meaning that the encryption key works across the board and in both in transit and in storage. And we always get a lot of emails from security people after we discuss this stuff because this is infinitely complex, and this is not a podcast that is security centered.
Mm-hmm.
It's security adjacent. But I think that's enough probably to understand that end-to-end means that you have the password and nobody else does. So that means Apple can't read it.
That's right.
If they get a subpoena, they can say, sorry, I can't read it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think a lot of us should be aiming for. And this always raises a conversation. Well, Sparky, are you a criminal? What do you care? I just don't like people reading my stuff. I don't know. I just don't. I don't feel like it's any of their business, even though it's me writing Mike Hurley about Usagi Yojimbo. I don't care. It's none of their business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. There's a layer on top of this that, again, is a little bit newer called contact key verification, which is an additional layer of security. And its goal is to make sure or to help ensure that you're talking to who you think you're talking to, basically. And so your messages are end-to-end encrypted, so nobody other than you and the person you're messaging with can see them. But contact key verification goes further and protects your conversations, again, verifying the person on the other end. And so basically you can send a manual check to the receiver and set up verification for a single person. You can do it at the same time. There's a couple of different versions of this. I played with this in preparation for this episode. It's not something that I use on an ongoing basis, but if you're a journalist or you're a whistleblower, or again, you just want additional privacy and security, this is here for you. But my personal opinion, for what it's worth, is that this is probably more complex than what most people need, and I think also is like kind of a confusing feature for people who aren't familiar with it.
Yeah, and I think this exists because Apple has customers who are journalists in countries where the government doesn't respect their privacy. In fact, actively seeks to violate it. And there are some people that need this, extra layer, triple secret probation level of encryption.
Yeah.
Not us, fortunately, but there are people who need it, and this also kind of points to the future. I feel like all of this stuff is eventually going to become more mainstream. I mean, we're in a battle right now with the internet. I mean, it's just, there's so much going on. I just read an article over the weekend over what they call grandma bait. Have you heard of this?
I have
grandma
not.
bait. It's a thing on Facebook, and they use AI and humans, and old people check into Facebook, and there'll be a random, because the AI, because Facebook is kind of slowing down. It's not doing as well. So now they're bringing in even more content from people that are not your friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to generate activity to keep you on their platform. So they've dramatically increased the amount of that you get. So then these AI bots just spam Facebook with like, hey, I just made my first cookies and here they are. And then a grandma sees that and says, oh, those look like really good cookies. And then they strike up a conversation with grandma, and before you know it, they've emptied her bank account. And it's like a thing that's happening now, but they use cookie posts for grandma bait. It's like, we have to, all of us have to be very security conscious. And I think I just went off on a bit of a random tangent there. I'm sorry, but I'm always conscious of this when I look at things like end-to-end encryption. I want to know exactly who I'm dealing with. I don't want people to easily be able to break in. And as the internet gets more aggressive about stealing from us and hurting us, we need to be more aggressive about protecting ourselves and our grandmas.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Let's talk about iMessage apps. So this is a feature added in 2016, and I remember the pitch very clearly. Basically, it was, you have all these things that you're doing in applications, but you want to do them with somebody. iMessage apps were a way for developers to extend existing functionality into iMessage or add like standalone apps to iMessage that you could use with people you were texting with. And so they were everything from games to you could set a poll up and have people vote. They pitched like restaurants can like have their menus and people can choose what they want and all sorts of stuff. Stickers, of course, lots of things. I don't think this really took off the way Apple wanted to. And in fact, in the newest version of iOS, the UI to get to these is like downplayed. It's also very weird. It's like the only UI like it in the whole operating system. But
Yeah.
it used to be just like a bar of little icons like above your keyboard, and it's not there anymore. You have to tap a button and then tap another button. But uh, they tried. The idea is interesting. I think it just didn't really fit with how people were using these sorts of things.
So this is like, I think, a play at WeChat, which in China is essentially an operating system through a messaging app.
Yeah.
I mean, people transfer money and play games and do all that stuff. I feel like Apple said, well, we want in on that. And I think what they found is that, most of their users aren't interested in this stuff. I mean, we have apps already. It's a different model. And if you're not familiar with it, WeChat in China it's a messaging app, but it's like the operating system. I mean, you can pick up any phone.
All sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. People do a lot of their mobile computing through the app itself. And I feel like this is kind of Apple was trying to like just test the waters on that. What if any of these apps do you use?
I mean, basically it's Giphy to search for GIFs and then GIF wrapped to access my own personal GIF library. That's basically it.
And for me, it's themed stickers. I like the stickers. I mentioned earlier the reactions, and they added a feature where you can use stickers as reactions. You can make your own stickers. I am a big fan of stickers and messages. I just love sending them. I have a bunch of them. I buy them. They're like based on my favorite popular media. No surprise, I own 3 or 4 Star Wars packs, but I've got others too. And I just find it fun to send people stickers. And a lot of apps have them as well, which is kind of weird. Like when, Fantastical has stickers. Like, why? But they do. And they're cute, but so I use stickers primarily. I tried when we were prepping for the show, there's an app called Pigeon, which is a bunch of little games like pool and darts and whatnot. And I sent you an invite and I got thinking, I don't want to play darts with Steven in my messages app. I don't even really want to do this,
Yeah.
So it's never landed with me. I really wish that instead of building an app store into messages, that Apple had built an app store into the watch faces. Like, could you imagine how much more money they'd make and how much more we'd use it if you could just go in there and buy watch faces?
I know.
But I'm drifting again. Drifting.
Yeah, I don't think it's been a huge success. I see how Apple wanted to do it. The other one I use, not all the time, but way more than any others, is Apple Cash, where if you're not familiar with this, because it's not in many countries, you can actually send money to somebody that lives in their wallet and they can use it anywhere that Apple Pay is accepted. And I use this, actually just used it the other night. My daughter was going to a sporting event with some friends, and she was like, hey, it's a cashless venue, and like, hey, can I, how can I, if I want to get a drink or a burger or something, what I do? And she doesn't have, our credit card or anything on her phone, but I sent her $20 in Apple Cash, and she had that, and she could tap to pay. And it is funny. So Apple tries to be helpful here. If you're in an iMessage thread and someone says, hey, you owe me $40, it will put in the quick type bar a suggestion for Apple Cash for $40. But it doesn't seem like there's any like real world logic checks on that. Recently, I was chatting with a friend of mine and we were joking about something. And he was like, something, you owe me $10 million. And the Apple Cash button popped up like on my phone. It's like, which I think is like, okay, Apple, like, let's everybody calm down. It just made me laugh.
Yeah, but I use it all the time too. I mean, it's a very easy way to send money to people, and and most people have a phone that can accept it. Like most people in my circles.
Yeah, it's very very useful, and there's Vimeo and WeChat and everything else around the world. But if you're here, it's a pretty easy thing to do if you've got iPhone using friends.
We actually have a moment every year in my bigger family, extended family, when we get together for Christmas, where we do the accounting after everybody opens presents, because always it's like, well, I'll buy this thing for you to give to so and so because I am at Disneyland, or you'll buy that thing. We have everybody's kind of like owes people money, and we have the big Apple Pay, settle up at the end of the day, or else we figure out how much we owe each other and we Apple Pay each other at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely is something I've done as well, but it's useful, and it's an iMessage app of all things.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Indeed. Go to Indeed.com/MPU and join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide using Indeed to hire great talent fast. We're all driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. So ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Getting a person with the right skills and attitude is the key. And when it comes to hiring, that's really important. You get the wrong person in your culture, somebody who doesn't understand the work or has the wrong attitude, you've got a big problem. Indeed takes the drudgery out of this. It gets you the right people fast so you can get the exact right match for your work. Boy, do I wish I had Indeed when I was doing hiring back in the law firm. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. So join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Mac Power Users listeners will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/MPU. Just go to Indeed.com/MPU right now and support the show by saying you heard about it here on the Mac Power Users. That's Indeed.com/MPU. Terms and conditions apply. Do you need to hire? You need Indeed. And our thanks to Indeed for their support of the Mac Power Users and all of Relay FM.
Another feature of iMessage that I actually really like is the ability to share your name and photo. And so we've got a link in the show notes, a Macworld article that our friend Glenn wrote going through this feature. And you can set your contact photo. You can also set a contact poster. So if you get a call, it takes over the whole screen. And you can tell the Messages app to share that with people you're talking with. And so you can make sure that, they have your most up-to-date information. I have a friend of mine who will remain nameless because I'm pretty sure he's a listener, who changes his contact photo. Like I change socks. It's like every time I text him, it's like message like new photo. It's like, okay, calm down. But it can be pretty useful, and you can limit automatic approval to people already in your contacts. So you're not just accepting a bunch of contact data from people. You can opt out of it. There's a lot of like settings around it to kind of personalize it the way you want to. For me, I accept manually, and I don't do it for everybody because I have this thing where I really don't like having people's contact photos as memoji. I like to see the pictures of my friends' faces, and everyone kind of looks alike when they're emoji. And so a bunch of people, I get that every once in a while. I was like, oh, hey, so-and-so got a new contact photo, and I'd see it's some emoji. I was like, nope, ignore. I'm going to use the photo I took of them on the trip we took together, last time I saw them or something. So you can still manage it, but it is nice to have it set up for easy sharing. Because most people, don't have good contact information. They have first names or no photos or something, and so it can be nice to spruce things up.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this feature. One of the big benefits of stopping practicing law was I was able to make an epic contact photo. And I just sent it to you. I'm standing in front of the Millennium
Yeah.
Falcon holding a lightsaber. I'm ready to do battle. That didn't work when I was talking, contacting judges. But yeah, I think this is a really fun feature. And as a power user, if you haven't turned this on, shame on you. Go do it.
Yeah, it's
After
cool.
the show.
After the show. Yeah, it is cool.
And after you turn on advanced data protection.
Yes. To do that first. So yeah, that's the sharing, and with iCloud or Gmail, however you sync your contacts around, that message goes everywhere.
You surfaced one of the items. You surfaced an item in the outline that I had completely forgot existed. Messages for business.
Yeah, I did too. Except that in preparation for this, because I ordered an iPad for pickup, I encountered it. I was like, oh right,
Yeah.
This is a thing. This is part of and I want to talk about all this stuff at some point in a future episode. Apple has a lot of business services now. Like we talked about it on our Apple Care episode, and then the multiple feedback episodes about Apple Care. But it is it's a way for businesses to use messages to interact with you. And it's kind of weird because it also relies on like third-party backend software. It's not like someone's sitting with an iPhone on the other end. But if you're a business and you apply for this and you meet all the criteria, you have all the software, you can send messages to customers. You can customize the UI. So like the top image where like a contact photo is, right? You can put your logo, you can change the color of the banner. You get a little, for lack of a better word, verified badge, so people know it's from you. And you can even bring in things like authentication and Apple Pay. So I ran into this because I picked up an iPad and I got a message from Apple, saying, oh, hey, your iPad will be ready at your pickup time. Here's a link to download your wallet pass or whatever. And just write in messages. It's really pretty cool. And
yeah,
companies that offer this, they can add a message us button on their website. So you could, we've all done the thing like you're chatting with a support agent in a web browser, and then like you accidentally close Safari and your chat that you've been on hold for 37 minutes is gone. Like we've all had that experience and when like throw our mouse through a window. It's pretty sweet just having it in messages, and I hope more companies use this over time. Obviously, it doesn't work for everybody, right? You got to be an iPhone user in the Apple ecosystem. But if you are, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I have never seen another company use this in the years it's existed, and I doubt anybody else will. But, we'll see.
I did look at it. I looked at it a while back, maybe when it was first introduced. It's like, could this be a way for us to do like customer service for Relay membership? But
yeah,
that's when it was like, oh, you need this like other. Like, there's a lot of stuff you need. I was like, you know what? I have an email address. That's really easy. So, email address it is.
Messages in the cloud. We mentioned it earlier, but I think this is something that some people get hung up on, right? So,
yeah.
Essentially, as I understand it, when you set it up and you get the encryption if you've got ADP on, you've got your messages all stored there. So when you bring a new device online, let's say you get a new iPad, you push a button and it syncs up and puts everything on your local device as well. So everything is just uniform across the board, where historically that wasn't always the case. Sometimes you'd have a message on your phone and you'd go over to another Apple device and it wouldn't be there.
Yeah, it was kind of like the old days of pop email, where I was like, oh, my email's different on my devices, and we all used to IMAP. I'll move to IMAP. So this is if you're setting a phone up from scratch or an iPad from scratch, and you sign in with your iCloud account, and you have messages in the cloud turned on, it all shows up, the complete history. And you still have a local cache, and on a lot of devices, it can be pretty big. but it can offload old stuff to the cloud, just like iCloud Photo Library does. It's also like iCloud Photo Library, where if you send, receive, or delete a message or a thread on one device, it gets updated everywhere else. And you can also set limits on how long it syncs historic data. So you can say keep it for 30 days, keep it a year, or keep it forever. I keep it forever. I turned this on. This message in the cloud service was introduced and then delayed like almost a year. They finally got it out the door. I, like you with ADP, I waited a minute and then turned it on. And I looked this weekend. I have 809,000 messages in iCloud using
Wow.
156 gigabytes of space in my iCloud account. I don't know if that's a lot or not. It seems like a lot, but
Seems like a lot to me.
let us know in the forums if you got more than a million. I'd love to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, a related issue that I think a lot of people have trouble with is SMS forwarding. And the idea is there are messages that come in via SMS to your phone. At least this is where I see it. And they don't show up on your other devices. And historically, that was a thing where there were some messages that were only on your phone. And I think people know that you can put those on the iOS devices or your Mac, but they're not sure how. And I'm sure there's people listening right now that are dealing with this thing where they have to go over their phone and check it. You can fix that now. It's not that difficult. The trick to this is you need to do it on your phone because you think you should be able to log in anywhere and enable that communication, but your phone is what's getting the SMSs. So that's where you decide what goes. And when you add a new device like a new iPad, if you don't go into the phone and update it, it's not going to get those SMS messages.
It was a real pain in the butt before SMS forwarding. I've got a couple of good friends who use Android phones, and it's like, ugh, I'm on my iPad, and their conversation might as well not exist. So I'm super glad they added this. I always remember that it exists when I set up a new device, like my new iPad Pro, which I migrated from the old one, but the SMS forwarding still has to be turned on per device, again, starting on the iPhone. But it's a great feature. We mentioned RCS like an hour ago. I assume RCS will work the same way, where you can forward those along as well. And the bubbles stay green, right? And it's still using your phone and the SMS stuff on your phone to actually send and receive it, but it's using iCloud to get it on your other devices. So it's pretty awesome. It's a good feature.
Yeah, I mean, like, for instance, if you're using two-factor authentication where you get sent a code as an SMS message, which is how they come in if you do it that way, you won't get them on your Mac unless you turn this on. And, there's just all sorts of little friction points you get if you don't turn it on. The trick, though, on the phone, it's in the Settings app and then the Messages app. And then in there, it gives you a list. You tap on it, and it shows all your attached devices, like Steven said. If you add new ones or get rid of old ones, the new ones don't show up. You've got to go in and manually turn them on. And you'll know if they're not turned on because you're not getting SMS messages on the device. Not that hard, but a big quality of life improvement.
Definitely. We also mentioned earlier that you can set up iMessage to work with your phone number or your email address or both. Again, this is in the settings on the phone. This is also in the settings elsewhere. And this is where a lot of people trip up. It's better than it used to be. But it used to be that if you had like your iPhone set up to send just from your phone number, but you had your email address added somewhere else, like messages would kind of fall through the cracks, or your group threads could be split because some people are texting you to an email address, others texting you to a phone number. So my recommendation always to people is take all your devices out and make sure these settings are the same on all of them. For me, it's just what I do. I only use my phone number. So I do not have any email addresses set up for iMessage. And I did that for historic reasons where it was simpler to do in the old days before this got better. But I just have my phone number turned on. And because of that, I don't have to worry about the start new conversation from, I'm doing air quotes, start new conversation from setting. But if you have your phone and email address turned on, that's something you want to make sure is the same everywhere. And I would recommend it being your phone number probably, unless you have a unique situation where you don't want your phone number associated with this. But that means if you start a new conversation with somebody for the first time, like you text your kid's teacher for the first time, that's where it will come from on their end. It'll either be a phone number or an email address. But again, I just use a phone number. I used to have so much trouble with like split conversations, especially group threads, where like one person would have just their email set up on one device and they started the conversation there and it broke the thread. That is generally better now. Apple's done a lot of work, I think, to kind of figure out what's happening and merge them back together. So maybe my only use my phone number thing's a little outdated, but it works well for me. But my big thing is here, however you want to be reached and however you want to start new conversation, just make sure that's the same everywhere so you avoid any stress.
All right, so now you've got me worried. All right, so I'm looking at the setting as message, it's settings/messages, and then send and receive. So what I do is I have it start new conversations from my phone number, but I have it so it can receive messages to and from multiple email addresses in addition. That's the way, right?
Yeah. And as long as the big thing is, I think, knowing where the conversation's starting and having that the same, that seems to be the most critical setting here. And again, like most people, I think, have their phone and email address. I didn't. The iCloud account I would use is pretty easy to guess, and I was like, I don't need that out there. That's all.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? You don't want to. And what I don't want to have happen is, like you said, splitting and all that. And I remember when that was kind of a big deal when they first opened this feature, but I've honestly never had a problem with it. So I've never really I haven't gone down the rabbit hole like you have.
Yeah, I blame my European friends.
Oh, there you go. You got to blame somebody.
Yeah, and I'll say, like, while we're here, Messages has a lot of settings. On the Mac, it's less than on the iPhone and iPad, but there's all sorts of things in here that we haven't really touched on. Like you can add a subject field and character count to SMS messages. You can see all the contacts you've blocked. You can manage check-in, which is this feature you can set up. So you have some parameters set up like, hey, I'm going to go to this concert, but I want people to know when I get home that I'm safe and sound. Like there's lots of stuff in here. You can filter unknown senders into a separate list. That's a gold setting during election season in the United States, at least, where you get a bunch of text messages, people to vote for. So there's lots of things in here that you can explore and learn more about.
Yeah, I have filter unknown sender on 100% of the time. And the one about the subject field is the one that always gets me. Like I've never sent a message that I felt like needed a subject field, but someday maybe I'll just send you one randomly one day, Stephen, because I think I don't even know how the mechanics of that work.
I've never used it either. The person I mentioned earlier who changes their contact photo all the time, they're also a subject person. It shows up in bold, I think, above the message. I think it's a hangover from like a weird SMS thing.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Screen sharing with messages. It's a screen sharing device. It's funny. I actually use this feature.
I do too. I use it all the time.
I go back and forth on whether I should have remote desktop software installed, but like when I'm doing troubleshooting for family, I often have them go into messages and let me see their screen.
Yep. It's built in. People are already probably talking to you there. This is just on the Mac. To do this on the iPhone or iPad, you have to use FaceTime, but there is now screen sharing on mobile through FaceTime. But on the Mac, this is a hangover from the iChat days, back when it was an instant messenger and Jabber client. And they kept it when they rewrote it in Catalyst, which I'm so glad for. So if you're chatting with somebody, you can click the info button, and then there's a share section in there. And you can share your screen with them, or you can request to see their screen. And, you have to accept it or reject it. Obviously, don't accept this from random people, but it can be really awesome if you're just troubleshooting something. Because look, I mean, trying to let's get onto Zoom. Like, I don't have Zoom installed. If they're already messaging you from the Mac, you have a way in for remote screen sharing and control. And it's just like it is locally. Like you can turn on control or observe. You can set up or have it set where you can talk like verbally and hear each other through the microphone and speakers. It's great. And I'm so glad they kept it because it can be a real lifesaver.
Whatever happened to back to your Mac though? Back to my Mac.
Yeah, they killed that a few years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. We had a thing happen where I went out of town and I put my ads into the Dropbox, but the Dropbox didn't sync. And you called me and I was out of town. Like, hey, dude, you need to upload your ads. And I had to like get my wife into my computer, and I was thinking, trying to explain which Stream Deck buttons to hit. And I was thinking, I need to put in, because I'm not like you, Steven. I don't have a fancy one Mac setup. I need to install a remote access, and this won't work for that because it needs to have someone on the other end clicking OK. But maybe we'll put that in a future feedback episode. In fact, if you guys have out in the audience have recommendations, because I'm looking at the various, there's so many different apps for this now.
Yeah.
But I think like just when I go out of town, I think I don't want it running all the time, but when I go out of town, maybe I'll cut a hole in the system for me to remote in.
Mm-hmm.
What do you use any apps for that?
No, I don't. I used, when I had a desktop and a notebook, I would run Screens Connect on the Mac Pro, or the desktop Mac or whatever.
A couple messages, random messages tips I've got for you. Reminders, I'm still an OmniFocus guy, but Reminders has this great feature where you can have it remind you of a task when you're talking with somebody.
Yeah.
And I use that with stuff like with you even. Sometimes I have reminders of things I want to bring up with you, but I don't want to like interrupt you. But the next time we get on a chat together, it reminds me. I think that's a great feature. And it's an example of Apple kind of like leveraging all its platform with its productivity apps. I think that's cool. The way to do that is you just create a task and reminders, and in the information button on the task, you can say, attach it to a chat with Steven or whatever person.
It's really cool.
One of the challenges I find with messages always to be capturing tasks, but they do have better sharing now, so you can share a message, and that allows you to put it in Reminders or OmniFocus or whatever. But in general, I'm not a fan of people giving me work to do via messages, because I think that is an area where it's easy to forget, because you look at it, and then once it's marked as read, it disappears kind of from your consciousness.
Yeah.
And I do think that, that's a challenge.
Yeah. I would love to have an option to right click on a message and say, get the URL like you can in Mail, and MimeStream has this now. And MimeStream is actually a right click, and you say get MimeStream link. So I can put that into Todoist or Slack or something, whatever. And I click it and it takes me back to that, right to that message. That would be so awesome in iMessage.
I was kind of a jerk with that MimeStream guy about telling him to make Fastmail integration. But when you tell me things like that, I hope they make Fastmail integration.
You weren't a jerk. Like, I would imagine that he gets more feedback about adding other adding other services than anything else. Yeah. If people haven't listened to that interview, that was in April. That was a really good episode. I was really pleased with that.
Yeah. The thing we didn't mention is that kind of parlor trick where you send with emphasis. You long press the send button, and you can make the words show up with an animation, or you can have the back of the screen, do something like a laser show or balloons. Like a birthday, I always send balloons to people with a birthday greeting. And this is a feature that when Apple announced it, they were, everybody was kind of fun about it. It was like, fun, this is exciting. And it kind of was in comparison to some of the social media apps that have similar features. And at the time I said, this is great, but in order to really get sticky, I feel like Apple needs to constantly update it. Like, I feel like at Thanksgiving, there should be a turkey animation. And on 4th of July, there should be a fireworks. We should just I just used 2 American holidays as I said it. I realized that, but but you should have, Lunar New Year and like just different kind of fun animations that they constantly update. Like there should be a little team just dropping these in and taking them out constantly. And since they released it, they haven't changed it once. And I think as a result, people don't use it that much, but I think that's a fun feature.
It is fun. And that was one of the things that before they rewrote the Mac app, couldn't do on the Mac. It's like, but I'm going to send lasers from my MacBook. There should be more of those. I totally agree. That should be updated, more fun, because it can be kind of cute to send somebody something with confetti.
Well, and they've done the work. You know what I mean? It's like my guess would be to add a new animation. All you have to do is create the animation. The underlying execution of it is already built into the app. So why not just add a Lunar New Year one or whatever at the appropriate time of year? Or just change them up once in a while. Instead of lasers, make it do a drone show or whatever. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I do wish that Apple would add some more whimsy to the Messages app. And this was a nice start, but it just died on arrival. What do you think? At the beginning, I asked, is Messages, is it up to snuff? Is it good enough to do the job as such a primary app in Apple's ecosystem? Are they giving it enough love?
I think they are. My point of view, of course, is American centric, and we use iMessage here primarily. I don't have a ton of experience with the other apps, but I would say that I'm pretty happy with where it is. I think that they've done a great job on the security and privacy. I love having all my messages everywhere across all my devices. And the sync with messages in the cloud has been really good for me. I mean, occasionally the Mac still takes a little while to catch up. If you've been gone for a week and you wake your Mac up for the first time, it's like, oh, I got a bunch of messages to download. But I don't have any major complaints about it. I feel like it's been really solid. It's kind of one of those services I don't even think about anymore because it basically just always works. They do have occasional downtime. They actually had downtime a few days before we recorded this, but those are few and far between. So I think I give them a thumbs up.
Yeah, overall, I would give them a thumbs up. I think that they've got most of the necessary features. That it takes a while to build all this out. The reply to specific thread feature to me was a huge addition, and I do think that the sharing could be better. Like ways, like you said earlier, to get just a link back to this conversation thread. You can, like I didn't mention in relation to reminders, you can say, remind me about this, and it'll create a link back in the reminders app. But not everybody uses the reminders app, and I think they should have a way universally to get, like you called it in the outline, a deep link, but just a way to get back to a specific conversation later as we are using these increasingly more for business and getting work done. And so that'd be my biggest request in terms of making it better would be better sharing. And again, just to kind of put a point on it, I think it needs more whimsy. I think silly cameras, like when you can stick the camera at yourself and it puts sunglasses on you or something, more send animations, more with stickers, all that stuff. I think it could be better at that, make it more fun to use. And not everybody needs those features, but I think it would make the app more sticky for people.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, it's a great app, and I hope everybody's using it to the full potential. If you heard about something today on it that you don't know how to enable, put it in the forums. Let us know. We got a feedback show coming up. We tried to kind of signpost as we went through the episode to tell you how to turn all those features on, but you never know. We may have missed one, and Google can be your friend for this stuff too. There's lots of tutorials on messages out there because it's such a popular app. We are the Mac Power Users. You can find us over at relay.fm/MPU. Thank you to our sponsors, NetSuite, Ecamm, and Indeed, helping us keep the lights on, as well. Thanks to our members, for whom we will be doing an extended version of the show today. You can be a member, too, of More Power Users. Learn about that at relay.fm/MPU, where you get the ad-free extended version of each show. Otherwise, we'll see you next week.